And you can tell that this Roddy Ricch counter melody is very catchy just by looking at it. And those are the exact notes of Tunnel Vision by Kodak Black, and this is what you can take away from this melody. And this is why the Portland counter melody is so catchy. And this is exactly how I made this sample. What's up guys, I'm Cubeatz, and today I will be showing you how you can improve your own flute counter melodies and how I made this sample. So I will be breaking this tutorial down into a lot of steps. I will be talking about the exact presets, banks and plugins that I use to make this melody, the music theory behind the notes that I chose to use on this melody, the mixing and mastering, the deconstructions of Tunnel Vision, Portland and Peta, and some various tips and tricks for you to improve your own counter melodies. But before we get into it, if you guys would follow me on IG and help me get to 2K on there, we are at 1.5K I think, or something like that. So make sure you guys help me get to 2K and I will give you a free loop kit just like I did 10 months ago, but this time with my best work yet. And check my Instagram for some snippets of the next loop kit. And without further ado, let's get into this tutorial. So let's start out with the exact presets, banks and plugins that I used to make this melody. For the bass sound, I used Ample Bass, which probably you guys already know, but this is the plugin here. And Ample Bass is probably the best free plugin for bass sounds that you may find on the internet, and the download link to that will be in the description. After that, I got this Ethno Rhodes instrument, which is like a chord phrase here that you can grab just going to stringed instrument and going to Carango, Shrangle, I don't know, but it's this one right here, and it sounds like this. After I had that, I added the same instrument, but this time a one shot, and I made this melody. And again, both you can just find on the Carango, I would just say Carango, and on the stringed instruments, and you can find both right here. And now for the flute melody, which in my opinion is what makes this sample very good. And this is the flute melody, and this is the melody that the flute plays. So for this melody, I use the recorders from Ableton, which is the best recorder library for Contact. And a cool thing about recorders is that you can hear recorders being played on songs like Portland by Drake and on Peta by Roddy Ricch. And one other very cool thing about this library is that Kyle Stemberger used it to make a very dope sample. And I'm about to show you guys how that sounds like right now. So this is a very good counter melody, at least in my opinion, and you can easily do and remake this counter melody using the recorders from Ableton, using the I think soprano category, and adding another instance of it but into the tenor, and the melody will sound like this. And I will explain why he used two instances of the same library after I play this melody. And he added another instance of this library because this category, the soprano, can play notes below C6. So this is why you need to add another instance of this same context library but with a different category, so you can play on a bigger range of notes. And that's pretty much it for the sound selections. So now for the notes and the music theory behind the notes that I chose to use on this melody. So first of all, let's start out with the bass. That sounds like this. And I kept the bass sound as simple as possible because the other instruments were already doing a lot on the rhythm, as you can see, like the counter melody of the melody bass and the flute counter melody. So I just kept the bass as simple as possible so I wouldn't make this whole melody too obnoxious on the rhythm. After that, the chord phrase sound that sounds like this. As you can see, I changed the velocities of each one of the chord phrase sounds so I could make this instrument more humanized. And one thing about this library and this sound is that if you change this chord phrase note just one semitone below what it's supposed to be, it will sound totally off key, and this is how it would sound like. So if you are trying to use this exact same sound, make sure you really search for the right chord sounds that are in key with the melody that you are making. After this, the one-shot charango sound that sounds like this. Playing this counter melody by itself, it doesn't really make too much sense because it doesn't have a rhythm to it, because I use the non-grid so I could make it more humanized. But once you play this melody with this chord sound, it sounds like a question and a answer, which is exactly what I was trying to achieve with this counter melody, and it sounds like this. So the question and answer is very good for you to implement on your own counter melodies, so you can make the counter melodies and the bass melody really bond together. And now for the notes of the flute melody. I know I already played this melody, but I'm gonna just play it once again, and this melody sounds like this. And this is now the time for me to talk about the 3 tips for you to improve your own flute counter melody. So the first one would be to care in which note of the scale you start your counter melodies. The second would be for you to make your melodies way more catchy, and I will show you guys some techniques for you to do that. And the third one would be the transition notes, that would be those little notes right here, and how to do them as best as you can. So let's start out with some examples. Tunnel vision, Peta, and Portland. So let's start out with the first tip. Care in which note of the scale you will start your counter melodies at. So on this melody, I start on the 3rd note of the scale, as you can see, A. Tunnel vision starts on the 6th note of the scale. Peta starts on the 4th note of the scale. And Portland starts on the 1st note of the scale. And this is very, very important because of tips number 2. For you to make your melody way more catchy, you need to use notes that are very, very close together. This is not a very good example. As you can see, the notes are very far from each other, but good examples of this would be Peta, Tunnel Vision, and Portland. And I'm gonna be showing you guys those melodies right now. So this is a very good example, and it shows perfectly what I'm trying to show to you guys. So you can see that the notes are perfectly placed one semitone from each other, and this is no coincidence because you can see melodies like Portland here doing the same thing, and you can see Tunnel Vision for the most part doing this. And this is no coincidence because using closer notes together is what makes your melodies and counter melodies way more catchy. And you may be asking, but what happened to this note that sort of broke the pattern of placing notes one semitone from each other? This note happens on Portland, Tunnel Vision, and on Peta. It is because you need to make your melodies more interesting, and you can't make your melodies interesting doing this for your whole melody. So you can see this sort of break happening on Peta, on Portland, where instead of just continuing this sort of pattern and placing notes like this, he just breaks this pattern, placing notes on C sharp. And on Tunnel Vision, where Cubeatz intended to put those notes here because they are the closest to B. But for him to make his melodies way more interesting, he just put them 1 octave above, so he could make, as I said, his melodies way more interesting. And now let's talk about the other tip for you to implement on your melodies so you can make them very catchy. So now that we went through the technique of placing the notes very close together, the second one would be for you to make your melodies repetitive but not boring. And you can achieve that by copying and pasting this first part of the melody that you did onto the second part and just adding some variations. You can see that happening on Portland, Tunnel Vision, and even on Peta. On all of those melodies, you can make them very catchy, just changing them a little bit on the second part where they should repeat exactly themselves. And now for the transition notes. What if you want to use notes that aren't exactly and perfectly placed one from each other, and how can you make a very good and catchy counter melody off of that? Simple, just use transition notes. Transition notes are very good for you to make the transition of 2 notes that are not too close from each other very good. And you can use transition notes for you to make your melodies way more interesting, like Tunnel Vision. Or you can use it so you can make, as I said, the transition from notes that are not too close from each other cleaner. And tips for you to improve your own transition notes would be to just grab 1/3 step grid or 1/4, placing them on the spaces that you want. And after you have that, just go to none, change a little bit of the position and the lengths of them so you can make them sound really humanized. And one other tip, after you change the lengths and the position of them with the non-grid, make sure you change the velocity of every one of them so you can make them sound very humanized. And now finally for the mixing and mastering. So for the mixing and mastering of the chord sound, I just took some of the highs so I could make it not sound so harsh. I added some reverb to it so I could make that sound more ambient. For the one-shot sound, I didn't add anything. For the bass sound, I just took the highs of it so they wouldn't clash with the other instruments, and I just kept the useful frequencies of the bass. And for the flute, I just cut the highs again so it wouldn't sound so harsh. After that, the mastering process is very simple. I used a compressor so I could make the melody glue together in terms of volume. I added a RC20 so I could make this melody sound more vintage and sound like as if it was a sample. I just changed the tone, turn down the magnetic, and put the cut like a little bit up. Instead of here, I just put it here so it would cut a little bit more of the bass, and the JZ losses so I could make the sample sound older, and a fruity limiter so I could add more compression to the sample. So thank you so much for watching. If you could learn something from this tutorial, make sure you leave a like and leave down in the comments some feedback so I can keep improving on making tutorials. Leave down in the comments too some ideas for next videos. And if you didn't catch some of the things that I said, make sure you rewatch the video. And if you have some questions, make sure leave them on the comments or just DM me on Instagram. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial, and I hope to see you guys on the next one.